This time we've pulled a stamp from Greenland, or Grönland, as we can see at the very bottom with the slashed O of the Danish alphabet. This was and is part of the Kingdom of Denmark. And we can see this with the crown above the word post, symbolizing the Danish postal authorities who were operating Greenland's postal service at the time. This particular stamp was first issued in 1963 for 10 Danish kroner. And in small text, we can see that it was engraved by the famous master engraver Czeslaw Slania. It is, of course, a beautiful engraving to admire. A polar bear standing on its hind legs. A detailed and wonderful work of art that makes this an attractive stamp. This is a used postage stamp with a postmark that has enough letters to see that it was sent from Sondrestrom, or by its old Danish name, Sondre Stromfjord, a settlement on the western coast of Greenland that was a US airbase at the time of the stamp being sent through the mail. I found a similar postmark on a 1967 letter online, one with the very same markings at the top of the postmark, which I now know to be the Northern Lights. This must have been part of a Christmas postmark featuring a plane and Christmas tree. Very cool. This is a small stamp measuring 20 by 24 millimeters and an opportunity for us to explore Greenland's philately. I don't think I have to spend too much time showing you where Greenland is. It has a really big presence on a world map. Lying in the Arctic and Atlantic Oceans, 85% of it is covered by an ice cap. Geographically, it is part of North America, although politically it is associated with Europe and is considered to be an island country, the world's largest island, although not as big as this Mercator projection map portrays it, but it is a large piece of land with a small population estimated to be under 60,000 people, meaning that with all this land, it has less people than the small island of Bermuda. While its history ties the country to Norway and Denmark, it is currently a self-governing country, but as a constituent of the Kingdom of Denmark. Prior to this, it was a county of Denmark from 1953, before that a colony of Denmark, and before that it was divided as two inspectorates of Denmark, a North Greenland and a South Greenland. Yeah, so it's quite complicated. We don't need to go into all those details. For the simplicity of this episode, just keep in mind that it has a strong connection to Denmark when it comes to postage stamps. And the United States, but we'll get to that. The capital city is Nuuk. They speak Greenlandic along with Danish and English, and I don't really have a lot of Greenland stamps. Well, I didn't, and that's what caught my attention about this stamp in the box. It stood out to me. Greenland is a rare sighting for me in my collection, and therefore I had to go online and purchase many new and used stamps for this episode. But that doesn't mean to say that Greenland is not a popular country to collect. I just don't think it'll be in everyone's albums. But go and look, because if you do have Greenland stamps, take them out now. Let's explore Greenland together. From a postal perspective, Greenland didn't need any stamps on its regular mail until the late 1930s. Mail was handled by the Royal Greenland Trading Department that would carry it for free between Denmark and Greenland, except parcels. So the first stamps that Greenland was using were parcel stamps. These were more like local or carrier stamps. This design was first printed and used by the Royal Greenland Trading Department to compensate for the transportation costs of sending parcels between Greenland and Copenhagen. And so they were actually mainly used in Denmark sending parcels to Greenland, much less so the other way around. These are fairly rare and can go for relatively high prices on the stamp market. There are a number of varieties, some more affordable than others, and collectors get excited about used stamps that have cancellations from a town in Greenland. Those are apparently quite rare. The words pakkaporto are on the stamp, Danish for package postage, with a denomination at the bottom, this one in ore. And notice that there is no country listed on the stamp. No country was technically issuing these stamps, but rather a trading entity. And yes, we have a key similarity between this parcel stamp and the one we pulled from the box. The polar bear. It is actually Greenland's coat of arms. This is directly portraying an older coat of arms used prior to the 1980s. This one's kind of chill. It's kind of a cute looking bear. Almost a cuddly bear that needs a hug. This one, not so much. This one looks aggressive. standing up and reminding us that it is the most feared land animal in the Arctic. Well, Laura actually says that the bear looks like it's singing, so if you just give it a microphone, it actually could be singing karaoke. We will talk about polar bears in just a little bit, because while we're on the topic of local or carrier stamps, such as this parcel stamp, you cannot talk about Greenland's philately without bringing up its Thule stamps. These were issued by the town of Thule in 1935. Well, this one for 25 Or was issued a year later in 1936. Again, these were privately printed, this time by the Thule Committee, and done so to commemorate the 25th anniversary of the establishment of Thule, the most northern trading post in the world. These were equivalent to labels. They were not necessary for postage. Mail between Greenland and Denmark was still free at the time in 1935 and 1936. These are attractive stamps featuring the sites of Thule, along with Dr. Knud Rasmussen, a Greenlandic and Danish explorer who established a trading post in Thule in 1910, and they are popular with collectors. Not at all difficult to get in mint condition, but a challenge to find on cover. But now in 1938, Greenland starts to finally issue its first postage stamps for regular mail. It was at this time a postal service was properly established, and Greenland joined the Universal Postal Union. 5 stamps, including the Danish King Christian X and, surprise, a polar bear. The issuing of these stamps meant that the Pacaporto stamps were no longer needed. Greenland could use these stamps on packages as well as regular mail, and you will see the letters KGL, the abbreviation for royal, in Danish. The polar bears were on the higher values, this time not standing or singing, while a very cold-looking King Christian X, with Greenland in the background, was on the smaller, lower value stamps. Now, I was able to find one of these polar bear stamps used on a cover, and I'm excited about this cover because it took me on an adventure that went a little beyond Greenland. So let's explore it together. This is a packboat cover, as we can see by the hand stamp. A cover that either originated on or was carried by a foreign ship outside of a regular postal service before arriving at a port and entering the appropriate mail stream. In this case, the cover came from the assistant surgeon aboard the USS Campbell. It was a United States Coast Guard ship, a combat cutter that was on a special tour of Greenland ordered by the State Department. It was sent in June of 1940. Denmark had just been invaded by Germany in April that year, 2 months prior to this voyage. And so Greenland was left on its own, cut off from Denmark. It was at this time the Greenlanders requested the protection of the United States, and so the Treasury Department dispatched US Coast Guard vessels such as the USCGC Campbell. The US was not in the war at this time, so they were just helping Greenland out while staying neutral. This cover was sent from Iviktut during the first time that the USCGC Campbell visited Greenland, and the polar bear stamp of 30 Or was used. It was sent to Mrs. Louise Jacobs in Staten Island, New York, but was forwarded to Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania upon arrival to the US. Flipping the cover over, we can see an additional Iviktut postmark indicating when the letter was received from the sender, and a Staten Island machine cancel and postmark on July 13th, when this cover entered the United States postal stream. Now, a key thing that this cover taught me and made me realize is that this is the start of US military involvement with Greenland. 10 months after this cover was sent, on the first anniversary of the fall of Denmark to the Germans, Greenland becomes a de facto US protectorate, allowing for American troops and patrol boats to guard Greenland from the war in Europe, and also a strategic point to protect against a potential invasion of North America. The US set up military bases, several of them listed under the US code name for Greenland during the war, Bluie. So Bluie West 1 was the headquarters for the US Air Force Command in Greenland. There was Bluie West 8, which was Sondrestrom, the place where the stamp we pulled from the box was sent from. Also, there was Bluie West 6 in Thule, the northernmost point of all the bases, and of course where the local post stamps that we had just discussed came from. There is a US base there today, the Patuxent Space Base, operated by the US Space Force. Anyway, this cover is the start of the US chapter of Greenland's history. And the other thing that I learned from this cover that has nothing to do with stamps and very little to do with Greenland was more about the ship itself, in which it had a very special sailor on board at the time that this letter was written. Chief Petty Officer, or Chief Dog, Sinbad, who spent 11 years at sea on the Campbell. After a sailor bought him for a girlfriend, but her apartment building had a restriction against having pets, he came aboard with that sailor in 1937 and didn't have a home to go to. The sailors therefore enlisted him into the service. He got given his own bunk and identification numbers and was part of the crew. He was one tough pup and sailed during the entire Second World War, seeing combat on numerous occasions, particularly with U-boats. In one incident, Sinbad and his crew rammed a U-boat, U-606, during the heat of battle and they sank it. Now, this damaged their ship so much so that it was disabled. So most of the crew evacuated, except Sinbad and a few men who stayed behind to keep the ship afloat while it was towed back to Canada for repairs. He had an impressive naval career and became a public figure, with his own biography being published. He then went on a book signing tour and even made an appearance in a comic book. Apparently, though, he was a bit of a troublemaker. He was demoted a few times after causing diplomatic incidents in Greenland and Casablanca. All this before eventually retiring here in New Jersey. Anyway, I spent a lot of time just reading up about this good boy and his adventures, and that's thanks to this cover. Let's get back to Greenland and its stamps, because in 1945, while Greenland was a US protectorate, they requested the assistance of some new stamps to be printed. It was a beautiful set of bicolor stamps portraying harp seals, a husky sled, an eider duck, man in a kayak, a polar bear, and King Christian X on horseback. They were requested by Greenland as they were running out of their first 1938 issue. Technically, these are the first commemoratives of Greenland, just not printed by Greenland or Denmark, and have been referred to as the 1945 American issue. I don't have any of them, but if you do collect Greenland, you would want to get a set, although they can get quite pricey. They were for sale in Greenland as well as the Danish consulate of New York. Eventually, after Denmark was liberated in May, these stamps were overprinted with Denmark liberated 5th of May 1945. Apparently, there was a bit of a scandal with these stamps and overprints involving a dealer at the time. I'll have a few links in the description to check out and learn more, but these are iconic stamps to get in Greenland's philatelic history. Now, an interesting thing to look out for when it comes to Greenland stamps is its name. The first stamps that they issued had its Danish name, Greenland, as we can see with the slashed O. And this seems to have been the standard for stamps from the 1930s right through to the 1960s. Then an additional name showed up, Karaoke Polar, or at least that's how I think you pronounce it. It's Greenlandic, the mother tongue of Greenland that translates to land of Greenlanders. And this is very interesting. Greenland was reasserting its cultural identity, embracing its uniqueness, and separating itself as a country that is different from its parent Denmark. This is partly due to Greenland becoming a county of Denmark in the 1950s, in which it had to assimilate to Danish ways of life and adopt the Danish language, ultimately letting go of its mother tongue, Greenlandic. But a movement to embrace Greenlandic culture and favor more independence as a country developed into the 1970s, and the language was very important to this. The only problem was Greenlandic was very complex to teach and learn, especially when writing down the words. So the orthography, the way in which you sound out the words on paper, the way in which you spell it, was complex and out of date. So Greenland adopted a new orthography in 1973, a new way of spelling the language. This had a positive impact on the language. Greenlandic had a boost in literacy rates. It was easier to teach and learn. Today, Greenlandic is the official language of Greenland, with over 90% of the population speaking one of its 3 dialects. And when we're looking at Greenlandic stamps, you can see this change happen. The way in which Kalaallit Nunaat is spelled changes around 1977, just 4 years after this new orthography was introduced. It is almost unnoticeable to the casual collector, but you can see this evolution in the language, and I guess its culture, take place in these stamps as the country adopted a new orthography and promoted its mother tongue internally. And with this, many of the towns had their spellings changed. New maps needed to be produced, and you will find postmarks prior to the late 1970s with those old spellings. So keep an eye out for which spelling you have. Danish is still present on the stamps today, but Greenland seems to always appear after philatelic. When it comes to imagery, Greenland has natural beauty to work with on its postage stamps. Arctic scenes that showcase the life of the Greenlandic Inuit, the northern lights, and of course fauna. But we have to talk about the big one. With a big and heavy presence on stamps that you'll see often is the polar bear. It is of course their national animal and is also on their coat of arms, but if you have such a beloved, feared, iconic animal, you better use it on your postage stamps, and they do a great job of this. According to the American Topical Association, there's over 300 stamps that have been issued that feature a polar bear on it. This is more common with Arctic countries, especially Greenland, and we saw that with the Karaoke Bear stamp we pulled from the box, as well as the parcel stamp, their first stamps. And I actually ordered some stamps from Greenland's postal service, postage, so that I can get some newer polar bear stamps and postcards from them. It actually came in a lovely folder that again features a polar bear, which is pretty cool. I found that Greenland is a philatelically friendly country, meaning that the postal service caters to the collector. They interact with the community, they make beautiful stamps. They also open up their yearly judging for the most beautiful Greenland stamp designs for the public to vote. Anyone can take part in the voting. Definitely check out their site. I'll place their link in the video description. I do have one complaint, however. I ordered these stamps with the expectation that I would get a modern Greenland cover. Basically a cover or an envelope or some kind of parcel that would have Greenlandic stamps on it, carrying these stamps that I ordered, but it would have my address and my name on it. And we could explore this modern cover together. And I thought that was pretty clever. That would be our second cover for this episode. However, when it arrived like this. Not a single stamp, and it was sent from Denmark via Deutsche Post. Why? I wanted a Greenland letter with my name on it, so this was a bit of a letdown and it made me sad. And now I don't have a second cover to explore with you. But Greenland's postal service recognizes that this is an issue, and they sent a lovely little note that came with the stamps that I ordered. The note thanks me for my purchase and for being a customer, and says, as our service center is now located in Denmark, we are unfortunately not able to use stamps from Greenland, which we would otherwise do. We have therefore enclosed a small selection of cancelled stamps, which we hope you will like. We hope to have the pleasure to serve you again soon. Postage. And here they are, some modern Greenland stamps that's actually very thoughtful and shows that they get us. You know, stamp collectors get excited about the cover that stamps arrive in, sometimes just as much as the stamps themselves, especially if it's coming from a place like Greenland or somewhere else that you don't get a lot of mail from. Oh well. There is a lot more that can be explored with Greenland and its philatelic past. This was just a taste of it. And like I said earlier, I'll place links to more information, more videos, more content for you to look up about Greenland, as well as to its postal service to check out online. Let me know in the comments section if you collect Greenland and what you enjoy about Greenlandic stamps. Also, what other things have you learned about Greenland through its stamps and postal history? If you enjoyed this episode, please hit that like button and subscribe. As always, thank you for watching and happy exploring.